friends. Well, welcome to our show, Talk to an Artist, where each week we get to know artists that have participated in our art distillery program and art cultivation, and have been part of our community for a relatively long time. And so I'm super excited this week to get to talk to Rafiq Salleh-Flowers. Thank
Hello,
you so much for
everyone.
joining me. Yeah,
Oh, of course. This is
yeah.
awesome. I'm so glad that you invited me.
Of course. So Rafiq, you've performed at lots of the art cultivations, almost every single one that I've been to, at least.
Yes.
Yeah.
It started with just, we tried the first one, and for some reason, it was kind of Malay dance, and I was
Mm.
just me. And of course, I told Lucila, and I said, I do drag too. And of course, she's like, "Ooh, can you do the next one?" And then it's like, "Can you just stay through the whole year?" So I'm like, "Okay."
Yeah. So you've been at every single art cultivation performed, and so you may know Rafiq as Dita, our wonderful
Yes.
resident drag queen who does beautiful performances, and you create all your own costumes. Is that correct?
Yes.
Oh yeah.
So I like to kind of like have a theme. Like I'm sure like when they created every show, there's not really specific theme, but they try to apply something. And so I tried first to think of a music, like what I want to sing, like what I want to lip sync. And with that music, it resonates to um, the color of the costume or the theme, and then it kind of like has a flow. So everything is very well curated. So like the dance and how I move, and I try to pick culture that mostly Southeast Asian and
Mhm.
sometimes Hispanic, just because there's a lot of influence in Southeast Asia with Portuguese in Spain in the early 1500s and 1600s. So those are more like my kind of style. I mean, I
Yeah.
particularly lean towards the Japanese just because I love their culture. It's very like bento box. It's very compartmentalized. Like
Yeah.
everything has its own section. So
That's
so that's how
awesome.
it started. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's super cool. So I'm super excited to have you on this show. So
Thank you.
why don't you tell people who haven't necessarily been able to go to art cult or don't, haven't gotten a chance to get to know you, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
So I'm originally from Singapore, born and raised, and I moved here in 1998. So I've been here 22 years. I met my partner at that time, and he's now my husband. We've been together 24 years. So I came here as a student, went to the Art Institute, and I graduated with a visual communications, kind of like a merge between graphic design and marketing. And then I worked for, I think, 8 years with an agency, and then started my own business with design and opened a bubble tea shop right by Galleria. And did that for 3 years, and then do a lot of volunteer work with immigration equality, a lot of immigration work. My husband at that time also worked with the immigration related to asylum and refugees, but mostly asylum. So I kind of like thought at that time, when you're on a work visa, you can't really work outside your job that you are currently. So I always want to like do art, but like I can't sell a painting because that's outside the scope. So I decided to like donate all my painting to the nonprofit, and so we'll have an art show. They will provide the venue, they'll do all the invitation, get all the guests, and then all I did was we do a fundraising, some sort of a silent auction. So the first year we did at the where's that lost right there by the police station in uh, the South Side and Lamar. So I did a tapestry artwork, and so that's where kind of like I hand painted them, and we did like $11,000 we raised for that nonprofit. And then the following year, I did hand painted kimono. Like I would buy plain silk and paint them and dye it, and then we did like 12 pieces. And I got some friends to kind of partake with that exhibit, and they did raku, which is a pottery Japanese style kind of throwing, and we raised about $38,000 the second year. And so it kind of like got me into like, oh, I need to start making costume because I have this sewing machine that's just sitting there. So I started learning how to make a shirt first, and then next thing I know, like my husband took me to Joann's about the patterns, and I'm making jackets and things like that. And I don't know how I got into the drag thing. I think it
Mm.
started when we went to a bar on Oaklawn, and
Mhm.
I saw a drag performance. But I mean, I've seen drag shows before at the Roast Room when I first moved here. But it wasn't like, it was so different because we don't have that culture in Singapore where like
Mm-hmm.
there's a drag show, particularly because homosexuality and that type of things is unnatural offense in Singapore. So you can go to prison for being gay,
Wow.
or or even like fined or go to prison or even caned. And so never really kind of like partake or kind of like be involved in that type of community, but I've seen some. And so I've always like, oh, I want to try that, like just to see it. And so one of the drag queen at that time that I saw the show at the bar, and she's like, or she invited me and said, you want to try one? I said, okay. And so I did an Indian Bollywood performance, and
Oh.
took me like 3 days to memorize this Hindi Bollywood song that I don't even speak any Hindi at all. So memorize, repeat it, and I want to make sure like my lipstick is on point, and I made the sari, I made the headdress and everything, and that was so much fun, and I enjoyed it, just making the stuff right. And of course, finding the right music, and then when I performed, it was fun, but at the same time it wasn't really a performance because the culture was more about like you just lip sync, you don't do much of
Yeah.
dancing, and then people give you the money, right? Because you want to raise money for a nonprofit. So I never really get to like express myself because it's all like just getting the money. You get interrupted a lot. And so when fast forward like last year, when Lucilla say, hey, we have this platform where you can do your performance, whatever you want to do. And so when I did the Malay dance first, I wasn't like in tune with I mean, I can do the Malay dance, but it wasn't like something I feel like is artistically in me. And so when I did the drag first one, I did a Japanese kimono with a headdress, and everybody was like in awe because they never seen anything like that. And the music I use a merge of Japanese and kind of like indie, like I did Creep from Radiohead cover, so it was like so different, like and even the words itself, like I don't belong here. It almost feels like I'm a drag queen, but I don't fit in the drag queen culture because they are typical, like big wigs, glittery costumes and all that. I'm more like this very muted, very understated, but still like big hair pieces and really like very culturally inspired costume. And so it felt like I belong there in some way.
That's so
So
cool.
so back and forth, like between thinking of like drag. I mean, I've done drag before to raise funds, from 2011 to 2015, but I never liked the fact that it was I have to look like a woman, like wear a wig, wear a dress, wear a bra, and I feel like, but that's not me. Like I don't want to be confined as a drag queen in that. I want to be more artistically like a female impersonator performer.
Yeah.
So calling me a drag queen won't be like something like that would be my label. I'm more like maybe a gender bending queer artist in some way.
Yeah.
So it's like the last performance I did in March. I mean, so, yeah, it was early March, right? No, February.
Yeah.
It was so much fun because I did this Japanese Shinto kind of like male warrior costume, even though I had makeup on and it has this umbrella, and I was doing Rihanna umbrella, and I did this really crazy movement, and it was so much fun because I didn't have to look like a woman and I don't have to look like a man. It's like I can be whatever. I think that was the fun of it.
Yeah, I will say I your performances are always so, there's such beauty to them, and this like sense of kind of refinement and just real, it's like nothing I've ever seen before. So I'm so thankful you found kind of your voice in performance. So you create your own costumes and your own performances. So what's been the most difficult aspect of kind of creating and performing these new pieces that are your child? You created this yourself. So what's the most challenging part of that?
So I think the hard part is always finding the right music and then the right tone, because sometimes some music it's either too upbeat, too kind of like mainstream. And then if I find really cool one, is it too slow? It's gonna like that doesn't really get people fired up. If you perform, it's like, oh my god, can he wrap this up already? Like, and so I have to find that right song, right beat, right feel. And then when I found something, then I go, oh, I could do this costume, or I could do this costume. Let's say, for example, with the one I did last time with
Mhm.
Rihanna, right? And when I heard it was like a cover of Rihanna umbrella, not the traditional Rihanna. And so I thought, um, what would be a really cool costume that would fit that song? And I
Mhm.
thought, oh, maybe a Japanese culture, because most of the geisha always carry an umbrella. But then I go, I don't want to wear another kimono. I thought,
Mhm.
oh, maybe more of the male warrior. And so I did that kind of like white shield vest looking thing, but it's like
Mhm.
so structured, but also has the kind of feminine figure to it. And there's this skirt, but it's also like is universal. It's not the male or female inspired. And then I had this umbrella hat with that white umbrella, so it really fits all that together in some way, because I was always going back and forth between a Bollywood song like
Mhm.
Hindi, or my culture, the Malay song, or Indonesian, or
Mhm.
Japanese, so around those region. I've tried like finding K-pop, Korean type of music,
Mhm.
but it's just it doesn't fit with the environment that people come to auxiliary,
Mhm.
because they're very avant-garde people, right? So you want to be so different, you don't want to be like this mainstream K-pop,
Yeah.
hip-hop, because I let other drag queens do that.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great description of what you do, and it's so. Thank you for letting us into kind of your process of creating something. So you've performed for the past year at Art Cultivation. So
Hmm.
far, what has been your favorite piece that you've performed, and why is it your favorite?
I think every performance is so different
Mm.
and so unique. Like I can't really pick one.
Yeah.
But the last one that I did with the
Mm.
umbrella, what makes it so special was because the previous all drag show, I had these huge headdresses. I did the Lady Guadalupe, like the
Yeah.
spikes of gold and
Mm.
all black dress, and I did a Hallelujah, and then I did a Malay one, Malaysian dance, and I did the Dia de los Muertos, like with the flowers. But those are all like just very subtle movements, right?
Mhm.
Everything's all lip syncing and moving. Never really express myself.
Mm.
So my husband's like, you need to go extra, like go big and go crazy. And so, and usually I never drink before I perform, just because
Mhm.
I don't like to like forget my words.
Right.
And so for some reason, that one, the last one, I was like, I'm going to have me a glass of wine and just
Yeah.
whatever, and then just dance. And so the moment I got on that stage, I'm like, don't think, just dance. And I did. And I was like, just dance. And I think we had a standing ovation, because nobody really saw me perform that out there. It's always
Mhm.
very subtle movements, very soft, very mellow. So it
Mhm.
was very different. And I think I'm trying to get more of that niche. It's just finding the rap music again to kind of like explore that.
Yeah. Well, what a
So
cool. I'm so thankful for art cultivation in so many ways that it allows
yeah.
artists to like find their voice and find
Hmm.
what, learning to express yourself. And so you've kind of had a year of evolution almost
Hmm.
in your own art.
And also too, like they always kind of like be very they're very malleable in terms of
Mhm.
how how a certain the Rano show, right? Before I was like number four, or after the second break, and then they go, okay, how about you do the opening, and then you come back and then do
Mm.
the first one, because I brought up to like one of the producers, and I said, it's nice that I can just go out there and like mingle and people take photos, but the thing is, I don't want to be out there up front if you put me on the fourth or after the first break, because then you know like they're missing um, that surprise, right? So if I'm already out first, then I can start hanging out with the crowd, take pictures during the break, that kind of stuff. So because the costume is so different, and I make them from scratch, nothing was like bought. Like I made every ribbons and every like ruffles, all is made. So
Yeah. Yeah, the element of surprise I think is also a great part of like your performance is you come out in
yeah.
these beautiful costumes and everyone just kind of is like, oh my gosh.
And also too, thank to thanks to the lighting guys. I mean,
Yeah.
they did amazing. I think having the rehearsal helps because
Mhm.
then they know like what are you wearing? Okay, what the lighting do you want? How are you
Yeah.
gonna get on the stage and from the stage, that kind of stuff. So I think that really helps set the ambiance
Yeah.
because if we don't have those, then it just feels like we just throw things together. So
Mhm.
somehow it has that kind of a step up of being professional, but we're not
Mhm.
there yet to a like at the symphony kind of thing.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I got to do your lighting for the February show, the
oh
umbrella
yeah,
one.
that was amazing.
And it was my
I,
favorite. I've never been able to do that and like have the freedom to kind of do the lights. Like, oh, it was
yes,
so much fun.
and I was glowing. Like I think you
Yeah.
had it like the purple color, so all
Hmm.
the whites just kind of glow. It was so beautiful.
Yeah,
So,
that was. I'm not like a lighting person, but like the opportunity to light you was one of my favorite experiences at our
thank you.
cultivation. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've talked about kind of creation and and making things and creating pieces, and you talked about music a little bit. So I wonder, is it music that inspires you to create, or do you find inspiration from other aspects of life and you bring it into your performances, or is it really like you hear this piece and you go, oh, that's what I want to make and that's what I want to do? So what inspires you to kind of create?
I think it's a mix of everything, and
Mhm.
of course, the most important thing is I love to travel. Me and my husband love to travel every year. We always make a point to kind of travel anywhere around the world. Like we pick a country and we go like, let's explore the culture, let's explore the food, and so from there, like I get to see the traditional, the cultural aspect of the costume. I mean, not costume, like their
Yeah.
heritage and what they
Mhm.
wear, and so that inspires me to go, oh, I want to do something like that. And then I try to find the music to kind of do that. And then if it doesn't like fit, and I go, okay, don't worry about that. Let's skip it. So when when we were in Tokyo a few years back, I just love how their culture is very there's so many protocols, like you
Mm.
only do this, and then the woman does this, the man does this, everything has its place, and so it's very structured and
Mhm.
very internalized. Nothing's like, it doesn't have this individualistic aspect to it, and so I'm very fascinated with that. And also the theory behind what they do is it's almost a mastery of like making tea, they master it,
Yeah.
making pottery, they master that. So it's learning to be at the moment in what you do, whether it's cooking, cleaning, everything has a zen piece to it. So I was very fascinated with that culture. And when we toured the castle, the garden, the
Mhm.
palace, and I saw this exhibit of the kimonos, and I think that was inspired. I was like, wow, I always want to learn how to make a kimono. And so I got home, I'm like, I'm gonna cut this, I'm gonna hand paint them, and I'm gonna dye it, and then
Yeah.
figure it out. And then if it works, it worked. If it doesn't, I'll try it again. So I think that kind of keeps me going. And then from there, it makes me think, what would I do with this? And I thought, okay, maybe I can wear it and perform,
Yeah.
or give it away. So it always
Mhm.
have something of a follow through of that, rather than
Mhm.
just make something and go, okay, what do we do? What do we do with this then? So travel inspires me a lot. I watch a lot of YouTube videos for some reason,
Yeah.
and it's random. It could be like a person building a house,
Mm.
tiny homes, or a person fixing a sink. Like anything like that could just, or even like runway shows. Like I see
Mhm.
fashion shows, like, oh, I like that jacket. I want to learn how to
Yeah.
make that. So by watching things, by
Mhm.
going out, being involved in volunteer work, those things
Mhm.
inspires me because you listen to people's stories, you meet people, everything has some sort of a connection. And so
Yeah.
I think that's where it helps me put those things together, and how I connect with other people in
Mhm.
what I bring to myself in terms of inspiring myself.
Yeah. That's so cool. I love that travel inspires you because I'm like a big traveler myself. And so being in the stay at home thing has been really like cramped my style.
Yes.
So, we're all stuck at home and we're all
Hmm.
in here in this quarantine together. So during this time, is there a book or film or a YouTube video that you could recommend for people to read or watch during this stay at home order that you think would inspire them, or whatever, why you would want them, and why would you want them to watch that or read that?
So I like, I mean, of course, we all binge watch, right? Whether
Yeah.
it's Netflix or Prime, Amazon Prime.
Yeah.
One thing I really enjoy is documentaries, because I
Mm,
think it gives a window of us to see what people are going through, whether it's a autobiography, whether it could be immigration
mhm,
situation, or even like the based on a true story with Brian Stevenson, where he helped men who's been incarcerated in prison
mm,
for wrongful arrest or imprisonment.
yeah.
And so when I mean last year we did a road trip to Alabama, Montgomery, to really understand
Mhm,
with the Justice Peace Museum that they opened. I
mhm,
mean, with the whole lynching history of lynching and how it kind of like moved into legalized lynching, which is going on right now,
yeah.
um, and how the history of Black men after years is systemic, that they have been targeted all their life since they brought here in the United States. And so it gives me a perspective to really like how their story is being told, and how do I take that in
Mm,
and not make that is my issue, but more like being more understanding is not the word. It's
mhm,
more like how do you make it relatable to you, that
mm,
you try to empathize.
yeah.
Because I think when people say I understand, no, you don't. Nobody
Mhm,
understand anybody, because all our circumstances are very different. So it's about how we empathize and learn and have a dialogue with that.
yeah.
So by reading and really watching those documentaries help me kind of like get through, like how do I see a Hispanic woman deal with her life, or Iranian woman who
Mhm,
has been immigrated here as a refugee. Those things kind of like
yeah.
give me a sense of where I'm at in my life and how grateful I should be, um, and how much I should do to help out there.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
So
a good word.
documentaries is very important, and of
Yeah.
course I do read, but I don't read that much, just because I'm more of a I watch and see, and I
Mhm,
can learn faster than trying to read. But I do, I joined a book club years ago. It's just hard because um, people pick books that I'm like, I don't want to read that, but you have to
yeah.
read it, and then you
Mhm,
go, okay. Like for example, one of them picked the I think it's the not prequel of the Seven Pillars of Wisdom, which is the
mhm.
Lawrence of Arabia, and I'm like, oh my god, these words are so archaic. I have to have a thesaurus next to me every time I read this sentence. I'm like, I'm not understanding it. So it's like, it's too much.
That's so funny. Yeah, that's why I always say like book or movie, because I know some people are like, man, I'm not a fan of reading. I'm not into it. I'm not going to do it. So, but the documentary suggestion I think is a great idea. I know last night we watched. I made my parents watch the 13th on Netflix.
Yeah, we're about to start that one. So
Yeah, and I mean, it is powerful, and just talks about, you talked about the systemic racism and lynching. It's now like
mhm.
been legalized in ways, and how slavery just evolves, and it talks a lot about that. So it's very, very interesting.
And not
Um,
only that, I mean, it
yeah.
also kind of like sips into the poverty, the
Hmm.
systemic poverty. It's like we've never
Absolutely.
given people opportunity. So it becomes this pressure and
Yeah.
oppression of like you just stay down there, and I think we need to, like equality needs to start
Right.
speaking out and stand out. We
Hmm.
need to give everybody the equal opportunity.
Yes. Absolutely. So kind of with that in mind, this is the question that you haven't prepared for, but I ask everybody.
Mhm.
Um, and the question is, if you could broadcast one sentence or two to the whole world, and everyone would kind of receive it and soak it in and really take it to heart, what would your message be?
Mm, that's a lot of them, but
I know.
I think this is probably one that I have kind of picked up last year, or like really thought about it, was we need to learn to empathize and be
Mm,
kind, because people are always going through something, whether it's financially, physically, mentally, um, anything that relates to them. We forget that other people are going through twice or three times more than we do. And
yeah.
so every time when you connect with someone or have some sort of a social uh, engagement, you always have to kind of like think this person must be going through something, so we have to always question that, because if we don't, then we just become, the world of narcissism, because everything's already like me, like Facebook, it's about me. Instagram, look at me, I'm doing this, so we never like,
Right.
oh, nobody's showing their true self in the background, where they're having trouble just putting gas in the tank to drive to work, or to school, or can't pay tuition. I mean, there's a lot of things that people are going through. So I think
That's a
that's
good
probably my sentence is learn to empathize and know that people are always going through something, and how we can reach out and help.
That's a good word. Empathy, I think, is very much needed right now in our country and society. So thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate you making the time and getting to have this conversation and get to know you a little bit more.
Yes, of course. I mean, this has
Yeah.
been fun, and I like that you guys are doing this, and I think it matters, especially now that we are in still at stay home.
Mhm.
So putting content that is really good out there, will make people listen, and maybe they learn something out of this.
Yeah, for sure. So hopefully everyone gets to kind of learn and be inspired and from, your work that you're doing. So thank you
Thank you.
so much. Yeah, thank you for being here.